Hi everyone, my name is Vinod and welcome to Career Bolt. I posted a video earlier on the Quad Fellowship and there was a lot of response from viewers of this channel. A lot of the students wanted to ask questions about what other scholarships are available and what are the deadlines for scholarships. Studying in the US is a very difficult proposition. They offer very few scholarships unless you apply for PhD programs. So if you want to study for masters in the program, you really are fighting a big battle. But at the same time, I also want to point out that there are a bunch of fellowships and scholarships available for students who know about this well in advance and apply early. So let's jump into it and let's share a list of scholarships available. I've broken it up into two sections. One section is for people who do not have work experience and are applying straight out of the undergrad or graduate program. So I pointed out 4 scholarships for them. Also, we'll be pointing out in the second part of the conversation about 4 scholarships and fellowships for people with work experience. Okay, so let's jump straight in. So I'm going to be talking about graduate programs in both US and Canada in this discussion for today. So if you're a student and if you're just graduating, no work experience, there are 4 scholarships open. Again, it may not sound like a lot, but it's among the very few, and you should apply to these scholarships if possible to stand a chance of being selected. The first one is a Quad Fellowship program. So I've already talked about this in depth in my previous video. So in case you have not watched it, go forward to my channel, search for the Quad Fellowship, this same image you see here, search for it and try to find that and watch that 7 to 8 minute conversation. It shares a lot of insight on the Quad Fellowship program. So if you have other questions, let me know, but if not, I'll move on to the next scholarship. So there is a bunch of scholarships called the Telluride Scholarships at both Cornell University and University of Michigan. Both are top ranked universities. Michigan is probably among the top 2 public universities in the US, and Cornell is one of the Ivy League universities in the US. The reason I put this up is because I ended up getting a scholarship from Cornell for a master's program. And this made my life very easy because the Telluride Scholarship sponsored my lodging expenses, housing expenses, and it took good care of my eating expenses. So it was a residential scholarship program. It made my life much easier. I also applied for a separate scholarship called the Francis Perkins Scholarship at Cornell University in the School of Industrial and Labor Relations, and they paid for my tuition, so which made life much easier. But keeping the Francis Perkins Scholarship aside, anybody who's applying to Cornell or Michigan can also get into the Telluride House at these locations. And they take care of all your housing, lodging expenses. You'll meet a bunch of very good friends. Again, it's a very selective residential community of not only students, but also faculty members. So it's almost like a brains trust of really brainy people at these universities tend to come together in this house. It's a fully residential house. You can be there for the entire duration of your program, and people who get the scholarship to stay in the house are called Telluride Scholars. If you are, for example, applying to Cornell University, you have to apply for this program by October 31st. So make sure you have the deadline in mind. And they really select people who are very, very good in terms of a bunch of guiding factors, like how good are you in academics? How good are you in terms of self-governance and building a democratic community? How good are you in terms of managing professional conflicts? So if you look at their essay, which I pointed out here, they have listed down questions like, what's your academic field? What are your academic interests? How good are you in self-governance and in democratic institutions? Talk about your experiences. So those things are important. Also, what makes you stand out from everyone else? So do apply for this program if possible. And the best of the best of Cornell alumni have been at the Telluride House. It includes World Bank presidents, Nobel laureates in physics, almost anybody top-notch who either taught or studied at Cornell University has been through this program and has been at the Telluride House, so including Richard Feynman, Francis Fukuyama. These are all like among the greatest thinkers of our time. So just look at all these alumni lists and you get a sense of what I'm talking about. But let's move on. There's also a scholarship which is offered by MIT for the chemical engineering students. And again, it's a interesting scholarship because most people who get into the chemical engineering PhD program automatically get funded in most US universities. So likewise, even chemical engineering students get funded. But there's a unique program out there called the Doctor of Philosophy in Chemical Engineering Practice. So you can do both the PhD and MBA side by side, even with relatively lesser work experience. So you can graduate from the MIT School of Management, and you can also get a PhD from the Chemical Engineering Department. It's a relatively new degree. Not many people know about this, but the selection criteria is a little different. It's not just for people who have expertise in chemical engineering, but it's also for people who are interested in business and who want to make a contribution to the management space. Their deadline is November 20th. So if you're interested in MIT, if you have good academics, if you have a good GRE score, if you're among the top of your class, and if you can get very good recommendation letters, do apply for MIT. MIT has traditionally shown a preference for people from IITs and BITS Pilani and so on. But again, there are also lots of people who get in from other schools. Specifically, if you are a female applying from other schools, you can stand a very good chance if you go ahead and apply for the master's program. So anybody can get in, but if you are a chemical engineer, if you're top of your class, if you think you're among the best of the best, you should apply to this chemical engineering practice program, by which you can get dual degrees from both the PhD program at MIT Engineering and also the MBA program from MIT Sloan. So do look at the website for more information. The other scholarship I wanted to talk about is the Ontario Graduate Scholarship. So for this scholarship, you don't need to really apply for it separately. You'll be nominated by your university, and the list of universities are given on the right-hand side. It ranges from universities like Trent University, University of Windsor, University of Ottawa, and so on. It also covers universities like McMaster University. It covers University of Toronto, York University, University of Waterloo. So Toronto is like the #1 Canadian university, so everybody applies there. York University and University of Waterloo are equally famous. University of Waterloo, for example, has got a very good tech and engineering program, so a lot of people love to apply there. And they also got an excellent placement record. So for example, if you're studying at the University of Vancouver, or if you're studying at University of Waterloo, you are guaranteed placements in the top tech companies, including the FANG companies. So these are great places to apply, and it's as good as any US university. So if you want to study in Canada, you should be thinking definitely about a bunch of universities listed here. But if not anything else, you should at least be thinking about University of Toronto, University of Waterloo, York University, or the University of Vancouver. But again, this scholarship is offered to 22 students who study in the region of Toronto, and the universities are listed here. So again, it's a grant which comes from the government to encourage people to be there, and selections are based on academic excellence, research potential, leadership skills, and so on. So again and again, something which comes to my mind as I go through these things is it's not just about academics. You got to be good in terms of leadership skills, giving back to the community, because a lot of scholarships go beyond academic excellence and measure what you have to deliver to society. So if you have a chance to work in a nonprofit, if you have a chance to work with NGO, if you have a chance to work with a local community, participate in it, give your full effort to it, because these things will help you a lot when you create your statement of purpose, and you can also end up getting very good scholarships later on. So you get a scholarship of about 15,000 Canadian dollars a year. So that's the Ontario Graduate Scholarship Program. The thing about Canadian universities is that the tuition is not that high. So this $15,000 you get every year could go a long way in terms of covering your cost of expenses of attending college. Okay, so I've covered 4 scholarships for people without experience, but for people with a little bit of experience, maybe 2 to 5 years of work experience, a bunch of new options open up. So I'm going to talk about 4 scholarships which people with work experience should be applying for. So even if you're not eligible right now as an undergraduate, think about these scholarships. You could apply for them a couple of years later. You could be, for example, the Forte Fellowship is typically for people who do an MBA program. The LGO Fellowship is for doing an MBA from MIT Sloan. The ZLOG scholarships of people who want to do a master's in supply chain management. So there's all these scholarships available. Again, it's not too many, but then as you get work experience, think about applying to these programs. And if you get a fellowship and go to the US universities, it's a no-brainer. You're going to have a fantastic experience. Let's look at the Forte Fellowship. So it's totally merit-based. You don't really need to apply for the Forte Fellowship, but then it's typically given to people who are applying for MBA programs in the US, UK, and so on. It is applicable for US, Canada, and UK. So you can use these scholarships, but typically it's for MBA programs. And they have a set of expectations, like if you're in the GMAT exam, you need to have a minimum 695 score. So you need a very good score to apply. They give you a scholarship of around $25,000, and only 3 people get this scholarship, but then not many people are aware of it. So this could influence your decisions in terms of going for MBA program. Imagine you apply for MBA program and you get this scholarship, it makes your life much easier. So that's a scholarship which is available. I know that these people typically give preference for women. It's predominantly targeting female candidates. So if you're a female candidate, Forte Fellowship is a great way to study abroad. There's also the LGO scholarships. So the LGO is the leader of global operations program at MIT Sloan. And this basically is a program where it's a parallel stream to doing a MIT Sloan MBA. So a lot of people apply to MIT Sloan to get a top MBA selection, and a lot of folks are not aware that if you have a background in manufacturing, supply chain, operations, the leaders of global operations program is a great program to apply for, because they give very good scholarships, fellowships, and keep in mind that you need to have a certain amount of work experience to stand a chance of being considered at MIT seriously for the MBA program. So around 4 to 5 years of work experience, if not more. So this is like a bare minimum. You need to have that to apply. The round 1 application deadline, like MIT Sloan, is in September. There are round 2 application deadlines you got to apply for if you want to apply a little later. But if you're looking at cost of doing a top-notch MBA program, it's super expensive. It's tuition alone for just 1 year is $100,000, which I've listed out here. There are a lot of additional expenses. So you could end up with expenses of around $130,000 to $140,000 for 1 year for the MBA program. Even if you don't have funds, MIT, from their credit union bank in the university campus, will give you a loan to cover the cost of education, but these loans are very expensive. It's difficult to pay these loans. So if you get a scholarship, it makes life much easier. This used to be called the Leaders LFM program in the past, and they used to cover 100% of tuition, or 90 to 100% of tuition. But since the placements are excellent, people end up getting very good compensation packages. They've decreased the fellowship a little bit. So currently, an LGO student gets around 55% of their total tuition covered. And the advantage is also that when you apply for this program, other companies who also want to select you once you graduate, like it could be companies like UPS, Amazon, and so on, they also have funding reserved for people who get selected in LGO. So if you promise the companies that you're going to join their company once you graduate, they are more than happy to cover the balance in terms of the tuition expenses. They'll cover it, also give you some stipends to live. So you can actually get a scholarship and get your MIT Sloan degree for free if you get selected into the LGO program, and also if you get nominated by a company to join them. So they will end up waiving your tuition and living expenses. So it's a great way to study. There's also a lot of supply chain programs out there in MIT, which not many people know about, but it's typically a 1-year program. And the placements are almost as good as operations placements and supply chain placements from MIT Sloan MBA program. So the Masters in Engineering and Logistics and Supply Chain Management is a truly top-notch program out there. They have tie-ups with different schools like University of Zaragoza in Spain and so on. So if you can actually spend some time in Spain, you can start your education there. You can spend some weeks in the MIT campus, and you could get placed in either Europe or the US based on what your interests are. So those are some advantages with the ZLOG MIT program. If you're looking at the average work experience for this program, people tend to have around 7 years of work experience. So this is for people with a lot more work experience than normal. And if you're looking at their tuition and fees, typically the cost of the ZLOG program, because it's predominantly based in Spain, is around 15,000 euros for the tuition, and living costs is around 9,300 euros. And this specific program can cover up to 70% of your tuition fees if you get selected there. So they give you loans to cover for it, and they also give additional scholarships. So it's also a great way to study for a master's degree, which can get done within like 10 months. You can also get excellent placements. So the deadline for this is November 1. They have a second deadline of Jan 31st and also third deadline of March 28th. So again, these are things you could be looking at as you think about studying at MIT with some work experience. The awesome MIT scholarships is probably one more scholarship which people can apply for, especially if you're female, because this is meant at advancing women through education. So anybody who gets into MIT are eligible to apply for this program, and they do give a preference to people who are studying in supply chain operations, management, education, and so on. So the deadline typically is that November 1st deadline, December 31, March 28 deadlines, like I mentioned earlier, for the ZLOG program. So that's an awesome MIT scholarship. And again, if you get selected for this, it makes your life much easier in terms of paying for your cost of education and making life a little easier for you. Okay, folks, so I come to the end of my presentation, but I'll soon be posting videos on scholarships you should be looking at when you apply in Europe, in other countries in Asia, and so on. So look out for these videos, and the only way you're going to get these videos is only if you subscribe to this channel. So please subscribe before you leave. And the more you subscribe, the more it's going to help the YouTube algorithms in terms of pushing these videos back to you. So do comment, do subscribe, and do let me know if you have other questions. Thanks, everyone. I had a pleasure talking to you.